Yes, sir. Can I do who? I can't get him yet. Take me a few more minutes. Hey man, you turns things around and change things around a whole bit, and it says a break at 3:10. We just got back. No, I was outside in the hall lobbying. So I guess it's hey. Where's Payman? Hey, is it time for people to take a break now? You got 20 minutes. See you in 20 minutes. Thank you. Hey. Hey. I'll tell you. I'll get him. I gotta get him talking more. I gotta hear him.
You can do Audie Murphy. That's what everybody says. I like Audie Murphy.
Okay, I'm gonna plug that in and work on it.
Used to a long time ago. That's right after you. When I
Do our banquet this evening. What about Joe? Joe will be following Dr. Horowitz, but it's a part of the next session. It was a group thing, I said, before we take our break after that. It's like two people in the group. That's what makes a group. More than one is a group. That's right. And if you come from the right, that's left. No, but I'm bound. When I came this morning, I had not met Dr. Horowitz yet, and I read the agenda, noticing that my name was on it. Also, a Dr. Len Horowitz. So I said to Payman, tell me, who is Dr. Len Horowitz, and why didn't you tell me he's going to be on there with me? And Payman said, I love you, Richard. Just work with it. I said, okay. And he pointed at him. He said, over that way, the dude that looks like Dr. Horowitz. All you got to do is open your eyes and read. And I said, okay, I'll read, you know. And so I went over to the table over there, and I look, and there's this dynamic guy with all of these books and stuff and tapes and all of this good stuff. And I said, hey, Doc, tell me something. What are you going to talk about? He said, I'm going to try to get the flavor of this together. And as he began to speak, I was somewhat taken back because my experience with people with names of Horowitz don't usually talk about Jesus Christ. So I was said, oy vey, we got a guy here talking from Horowitz saying Jesus Christ. I don't understand. But as we went on for a few minutes, it came to me very readily because people have a tendency to need to label things. And I need to label stuff, know what I'm saying? So I said, this is a Messianic Jew. Messianic Judaism. There's this connection between the Judeo-Christian ethic. There's not a separation between the two that many want to infuse in it. And I said, whoa, I think we're onto something here. So, I would like to have you give a warm welcome, a rousing applause to Dr. Len Horowitz. Thank you. He's a man. I watch that stuff. He tips over very easily on that podium.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Payman. And thank all of you for coming out today. I'm not used to standing behind a podium, especially, let me see if I can even lift this thing. I guess not. I'm not used to standing behind a podium. Usually I like to roam about a little bit, so you're going to have to forgive me. But it's a privilege and a pleasure for me to join you today. Payman has asked me to do the impossible. In 50 minutes, deliver 3 days of information. If you watched me come in, you saw I came in with 3 slide carousels. Literally each day, the emerging viruses information is on carousel number 1. The healing codes for the biological apocalypse is on number 2. And the what you need to do to prepare your temples of God, your bodies to defend themselves against the current and coming plagues is on 3. It basically covers the Healing Celebration book that just came out this year. But my heart, what I'd love to talk about is what, God willing, will come out in May and June of this year, which is called Death in the Air. It's a new book. It's subtitled Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare, which relays the most stunning revelations that I've been able to be blessed with to date. And I would like to maybe just touch on it. Again, as I mentioned when I opened this program today, that you need to do due diligence on the little tidbits of information. We're going to be throwing out a lot of information. You'll be overwhelmed at the end of this 50-minute session. And you need to go in and do a little bit more, and that's not because we want to sell books or tapes, although we greatly appreciate your contributions when we do. It's what maintains our ministry, what keeps us going financially, what puts food on our table. But more importantly, it's what's going to save you, your children, your friends, and your family, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, the documents that we deliver and the truths that are delivered. So, without further ado, I would love to spend 20 minutes going into how the current and coming plagues, delivered by the Rockefeller family and friends, and that we're told we're foolish conspiracy theorists when we bring in the names of the families such as Rockefeller, Rothschild, and all, but how these people are literally fulfilling God's prophecy. That when you go into the book of Revelation, for example, and the Lord has blessed me with being the carrier of some vital prophecies. The end times are here. I'll give you an example real quick, and you'll see it for yourself. The prophets who blessed the face of this planet said that there would be a time when the great plague struck. We have entered that time. They said that that would herald the Messianic age, a time when God's Spirit would be poured out on all people. An extraordinary spiritual renaissance would be at hand when the great plague struck, we were told. The information that I've been blessed with that I'm delivering now is the fact that all of today's current and coming plagues, the greatest plagues in history, from HIV/AIDS to the host of other vaccine-related injuries. Here's a short list. They involve the autoimmune diseases, the childhood injuries, the bizarre cancers that we never saw 50, 60 years ago, or if we saw it was very, very few. Today there are epidemics of all of these. Here's the short list of vaccine-related injuries. They include chronic fatigue immune dysfunction, fibromyalgia, lupus, MS, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, chronic crippling rheumatoid arthritis, adult and juvenile type 1 diabetes, Crohn's disease, Guillain-Barré that my mother, like tens of thousands of other people, died from after she got a flu vaccine that contained in it contaminants, Guillain-Barré autoimmune, Bell's palsy, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, and I could go on. There are many, many more. Then there are the childhood injuries, vaccine-related. All of these now are vaccine-related in the scientific literature to contaminants, ingredients, or just plain vaccine injuries. Childhood injuries now include these chronic draining ear infections that won't quit we never saw years ago. Multiple antibiotics and physicians' visits simply can't treat. And then you have these skyrocketing epidemics, particularly in California. It was the first state that recognized this, where there's nationwide now recognized a 600% increase in autism, also vaccine-related injury. You have attention deficit hyperactivity disorders that the vaccine contaminants and the foreign RNA and DNA from bacteria, virus, fungus, molds, chicken embryos, bovine fetal serum, monkey kidney tissues play a role in the delivery of these contaminants, as well as the DNA that causes genetic damage in the children. So you've got autism, hyperactivity disorders, attention deficit now skyrocketing. Of course, asthma, hay fever, and allergies. It's disgusting that you go particularly into the black community, into the schools there, and there you see the grade school children, approximately 15 to 20% now having to go to school with these respirators, with these aspirators, where they have to take medication to just even breathe. That's, you can thank the vaccines, and you can and the contaminated blood supplies have delivered everything else from hepatitis B and C to the mad cow disease agent called prion. Of course, the cancers include the leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, cancers, AIDS complex, Gulf War syndrome, and there are many more that are, for instance, related to the polio vaccines. The delivery of the monkey cancer virus called SV40, which was known in 1961 to cause cancer in virtually every animal it was injected into, and yet that did not stop the authorities from continuing to allow these contaminated vaccines to go out through the 70s, 80s, and on to the end of the 90s. So raise your hands if you've had family or friends who have developed one or more of these illnesses that I've named over the past, let's say, 5 or so years. Raise your hands high. Come on, raise them high. I want to see you. Now, if you look around the room, you're looking at probably 90 to 95% of the room with their hands raised. Therefore, if you don't think that we have entered into the time of the great plagues, you are seriously mistaken. Now, here's the good news. Those who told us that these plagues were to come also said that this would herald a messianic age, a glorious age of a spiritual renaissance. To show you that we are indeed on track for this as well, watch this raise of hands. Raise your hands if over the past, particularly 6 months, it's been happening on and off for several years, but particularly the last 6 months or so, you have felt an extraordinary increase in your spiritual sensitivities, in your synchronicities of experiences whereby you're thinking of something or someone, you're working on special projects, and like miraculously they come into your lives. And little miracles and big miracles alike are happening for you, and for the majority of you, what you simply do is you say, thank you, God, keep it up. I love to be in with the flow. Raise your hands if it's happening for you. Now raise your hands high, be proud. Now look around the room. You are looking at least 65% of the room with their hands raised. So this is indeed the prophecies. We are on track, and for those who have read the book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, which has become a national bestseller not because it's gotten any mainstream media support, it has gotten none. It has become an American bestseller with over 50,000 copies in circulation because of kind, warm-hearted, mostly Americans like yourselves, who had the eyes to see and ears to hear this truth and saw and see the documentation, some of which I'm going to present to you. Essentially, this is a book that heralds the great plagues and shows you who is behind it. And when you get done reading this book, you see why I throw the name Rockefeller into the mix. It was the Rockefeller family, when you get done reading this book, when you go back and reread Revelation, the book of Revelation, you see that these were the people who, quote, fornicated with the devil, deceived the wealthiest men of all the nations, says the Bible. Well, who is capable of deceiving the wealthiest men of all the nations? You have to be extremely wealthy to be able to do that. So that limits your selection a bit. Secondly, Revelation tells you that these people stole the blood of the prophets and the people. Well, you see, it was Lawrence Rockefeller who established the New York City Blood Council. That was the council of doctors that put together the New York City Blood Bank. They became the international blood banksters for lack of a better term. And that these were the people that allowed for 10,000 hemophiliacs throughout the United States and countless others around the world to get the HIV-contaminated blood that they knew was contaminated between 1980 and 86 and did nothing significant to clean up the blood, just like they knew the hepatitis C and hepatitis B viruses would flow therein as well as the protein prion agents for Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And that now you begin to understand, you begin to understand why Revelation talks about blood bankers. It says also that these people practice sorcery and cast magic spells to bring on their new world order called Babylonian system. Well, when you look up the term sorcery or magic spells in concordance, the root word is pharmacopoeia, pharmacy, pharmaceuticals. These are the international pharmaceutical industrialists. And suddenly now you begin, when you read Emerging Viruses, to get a very clear picture of what's going on here. You had, for instance, the Rockefeller family buy into IG Farben, which was Germany's leading industrial organization prior to World War II. For all practical purposes, they were the Third Reich. Their top officials were the top SS. For $35 million in 1938, the Rockefeller family secured from IG Farben the patent rights of the synthetic fuel and rubber that they were about to produce. The Holocaust victims were about to produce in the Holocaust victim-built and run factories outside of Auschwitz. And in fact, we were talking at lunch about the heating crisis situation in Israel today. Certainly, we all deserve to have our land to live on. The Jews, the Arabs, we all deserve to have the freedom, but the fact is that you can read the history books now, and you can literally determine that Israel was established based on a lie. that if it wasn't for the fact that the Rockefellers were blackmailed when the Israeli intelligence came to Rockefeller in 1948 and said, you either get the vote needed in the United Nations to give us our state, or we're going to expose the fact that you supported Hitler, gave Hitler all the oil that he needed, worked out your own deals with the Nazis, and literally committed treason against the United States. You either give us that vote or you lose. And that is the vote upon which the State of Israel was created. So right now, even that situation is beginning to fulfill Bible prophecy, heating up into a major war. You go on and it talks about the plagues, and it talks about that the plagues are associated with beasts. Well, you look up concordance, the word beast, and it's not just big beasts like lions and tigers and bears or dinosaurs. It's little beasts, bacteria, viruses, flowing through the rivers and streams that it says are the people. If you ask what is flowing into the rivers and streams of people all over the world today, full of contaminants, full of impurities, you realize it's the contaminated vaccines and the contaminated blood, all brought to you on a silver platter named public health by the Rockefeller family and friends. Revelation even has a sixth angel coming down and cutting Babylon's grapes, and they fall into the wine press, and the wine flows out, bringing the plagues to humanity. So this is really fulfilling Bible prophecy. Let me just bring you quickly through some really important documents. The Human Genome Project, just briefly, we get into in the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. That's this book. This is my last year's book with Dr. Puleo. And a little bit more thoroughly in Healing Celebrations, which is the practical how-tos. What are you going to do to prepare your temple of God, your body, to defend itself, your family? That's this book. You want to know the most advanced level of biospiritual warfare? That's this book, as well as what God is blessing us with, some revelations that I'll hopefully share a little bit with you. That's Healing Codes. But the Human Genome Project, which we have heard so much about, is a complete, like everything else, fraud. Do you know that the Human Genome Project, the DNA, and by the way, that's centered in the Rockefeller-created eugenics laboratories called Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories. You see, in the 1920s, what was called eugenics, though most people do not know what that term means today, it is, quote, the scientific investigation of genetic differences between the races, end quote. It included the genetic predispositions for diseases between the races, and that the Rockefeller family, the royal family of England, America's royalty called the Bush family, the William Draper family, as well as a number of other close colleagues, created the eugenics movement. The first racial hygiene laws in the world were in the United States. In fact, California was at the forefront of the entire eugenics movement. More people were sterilized in California, allegedly for mental retardation and other things. Of course, in the South, in North Carolina, in West Virginia, they were sterilizing children in grade school. If they did not receive a 75-point score on their intelligence test, they were sterilized because they simply did not want to bring up another generation of dysgenic people. Blacks, of course, if you wanted to marry white, you'd be at best jailed. In the South, you'd be hung, shot, or burned. You can thank the Rockefeller family and friends for this eugenics movement that gave rise to Hitler's racial hygiene program. Ernst Rudin, the director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Eugenics, Anthropology, and Human Heredity in pre-Nazi Germany, who later became Hitler's racial hygienist, he was basically put there by the Rockefeller family and friends who built the institute. So when you look at today's hyping of the Human Genome Project, here's what you're not being told. You're being told that DNA is the blueprint of life, that it gives codes for RNA to protein synthesis, which makes new cell parts, which gives rise to new healthy cells, which gives new life. That, by the way, is less than 3% of the function of DNA. What these sorcerers casting magic spells over your minds, dumbing you down so that you don't understand the truth as to who you are as a divine child of God, incredibly empowered with the full spiritual blessings of the Lord. The fact is that 93% of DNA function that they don't want to tell you about is to serve as an electromagnetic receiver and transmitter for virtually God's love. Now, of course, the scientists don't call it that. What did 3 out of the 5 top Nobel Prize winners in the field of medicine this decade discovered? They called it that the DNA's primary function, over 93%, is involved in what they call photon-phonon emissions for intercellular communications and cellular upregulation. Let me interpret that for you. Photon is light. Phonon is sound. Sound is how God created the universe. If you remember, in 6 days, he spoke the world into existence. Sound, words are what? Electromagnetic frequencies. What's that? That's mathematics and physics. What your DNA, because it's surrounded by clustered water, 6-sided hexagonal-shaped ring structures that have a divine sacred geometry to it, it's like 2 pyramids, one on top of the other, forms the matrix of your DNA. And that's what allows it to take in sound and light, virtually God's word coming in, like sending out that signal. In essence, what allows you to go to sleep at night feeling so dreadful on some nights and wake up suddenly in the morning all refreshed, because all night long you've been being blessed with God's love for you, created in the image of the Father, totally endowed with the spiritual capacity to co-create miracles, including miraculous healings. Now, guess what would happen to the pharmaceutical industrialists and in medical practitioners if you learned that? They would virtually be out of business. So that's why they don't want you to know that truth. So that's some of the little information that we give you in healing codes and in healing celebrations. Who, of course, teaches our doctors are the pharmaceutical industrialists. In essence, what you have is a cult. A cult. Medicine is a cult. And I tell you that as a Harvard Behavioral Science Masters in Public Health recipient. Behavioral science, media, persuasion, technologies research. I'm an expert being very persuasive. Be careful. But I can tell you as a behavioral scientist from Harvard that there's only one difference between modern medical professionals and any other cult in the world. The difference is this. Most cult followers know who their leaders are. In modern medicine, most brainwashed, mind-control slaves in healthcare have virtually no clue that they're serving fundamentally the Rockefeller family. So let me go on. Ultimately, in the book Emerging Viruses, I deliver some hard, cold, stunning documentation. What was done, and Payman asked me to just go over this, in order to create these new designer diseases, diseases that have a capacity to only trigger certain disease predispositions in even certain races. You think it's an accident today? As of 2 years ago, 73% of HIV/AIDS cases in the United States are black and Hispanic. You think that's an accident? Same accident that 25% of black women in the United States are sterile. Same accident that 35% of Native American women are sterile today. How do you think they got sterile? If you read the propaganda, the bogus statements that these people live in squalor. They don't take care of themselves, so they get sterile. They don't eat right. Well, you know what? You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you know, when you go study medicine and embryology and physiology, you learn that an embryo will continue to develop, that a fetus will steal the minerals and nutrients out of a malnourished woman. They won't get sterile. They'll have the baby. The mother will die during childbirth, but they will have that baby. So what got these people sterile was vaccines, such as HCG, human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone, given to tens of thousands of women. It was first found out in the Philippines. The Philippine Medical Association reported it in 1989. Studies that showed that the vaccines that the World Health Organization delivered, of course, another puppet agency associated with the Rockefeller, heavily funded by the Rockefeller monopolists over world healthcare and virtually world science. That was the vaccine that delivered sterility, in keeping with the Population Council, which was Rockefeller's funded population council of the city of New York that gave rise to all the other population councils. Very recently you heard of the passage by the FDA of the drug RU-486. Think about it. When you 86 something, what do? You trash it, you get rid of it. RU-486? That is how that drug got its name. So this is a Rockefeller creation. It goes with the population councils. Now these people are at the forefront of science. You can study just far more than my works to come to the realization that what I'm telling you is true in historic fact. And what they did to create these types of viruses that are going around now is called hybridization. Not using sophisticated biotechnology. In the old days they had bench work, basic science for recombination that they would inject monkeys with, let's say, cat viruses to get things to jump species. So they, for example, took Gallo, Robert Gallo, who's the guy who allegedly discovered the AIDS virus in 1984. I'm going to show you on a 1962 contract where he was producing these types of viruses with colleagues from Lytton Bionetics. He took simian virus 40, the 40th monkey virus ever discovered that was known to cause cancer in virtually every animal it was injected into, recombined it with cat leukemia, caused a laundry list of symptoms virtually identical to what AIDS patients suffered from. Chicken leukemia sarcoma virus caused wasting immunosuppression and death. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then to get what they called a mutant hybrid, which is right in front of the chicken's bill right there, chicken's face, that's a mutant hybrid of the recombinant of the two. To get it to jump species into humans, they cultured it in human white blood cells in some studies and human fetal tissue cells in culture in other studies. So that's essentially the crude laboratory work that they were doing way back in the 60s, 1960s and early 70s. And of course, who were these people that Gallo worked with to do this work was none other than Bionetics research labs. Here you see them sixth on the list of major Army biological weapons contracting firms. This is directly from the United States Congressional Record. Well, I could go on and talk more about different things. I could talk about the genocide that's going on in Africa today that relates directly to this type of documentation. Here you have from the National Cancer Institute's monograph the fact that you have the heart of the African AIDS belt. This is long before AIDS broke out. This is 1974 document where you're seeing work in the early 70s in particularly the areas that we're seeing now, the herpes-type viruses, that includes Epstein-Barr, simian cytomegalo. These are cofactors for immune suppression and cancer. And then hepatitis B. Hepatitis B vaccination. In fact, it was the 1974 experimental hepatitis B vaccine that was given to... That's right. Can you give me something to lift this up? Can I do that? Yeah.
That's all right. Just stay near them. You're more comfortable like
Yeah,
this.
excellent.
Okay.
So basically, it was the 1974 experimental hepatitis B vaccine given to gay men in New York City and blacks in Central Africa that, according to all the epidemiological evidence, the science, including the DNA sequencing of the full viral genome. You've heard reports that their viruses were a long time ago, centuries ago, AIDS virus evolved. Well, portions of it did, but the full gene sequence you find that came out in the mid-70s, and that it all relates to this particular vaccine produced by the Merck Pharmaceutical Company, whose man, Dr. Maurice Hilleman, we have actually on the tape called Horowitz on Vaccines, telling you that he brought the AIDS virus into North America in contaminated monkeys destined for vaccine research and development at the Merck Pharmaceutical Company. Meanwhile, the Merck Pharmaceutical Company you can trust about as much as you can trust the Rockefeller family. They were the ones who received the lion's share of the Nazi war chest at the end of World War II. On August 10th, 1944, the, quote, German flight capital, end quote, was sent out to establish a virtual forever monopoly over the world's pharmaceutical and chemical industries. And that 750 corporations received that to secure that monopoly. The lion's share went to the Merck Pharmaceutical Company, and their president at that time was George W. Merck, who's at the time was, when the Nazi windfall profits came in, was none other than America's biological weapons industry director, personally appointed by President Roosevelt and Secretary of War Stimson. So the heart of the African AIDS belt, right there where you see those stars and the square, was where they were testing these vaccines. This is northwest Uganda region of Central Africa, and of course also in New York City you see a square that relates to the same fact that they were using gay men there in 1974 and 75 to produce what now amounts to global genocide. In front of you is why the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola became a bestseller. If you can sharpen that, Brian, can you do me a favor, just tweak that focus a little bit? This is what you're looking at that made people wake up who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Right there, perfect. You're looking at the United States government contract under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered by the Army's 6 top biological weapons contracting lab, Bionetics. You see, the title of the investigation was called Investigations of Viral Carcinogenesis in Primates. That's cancer production through viral infections in monkeys and humans. And there you see the name Dr. Robert Gallo as the project officer for the National Cancer Institute, and you see that the date that the contract was initiated was February 12, 1962. 62. Recently, Dan Burton's Congressional Investigating Committee, this is about 7 months ago or so, Beth Clay, who was the administrative officer overseeing the hearings, called me and said, Dr. Horowitz, word is out that you have some stunning information that the Congressional Committee needs to see regarding vaccines, vaccine contaminations, and AIDS. I said, yes, Beth, that is the truth. I'll be happy to send it to you. So I overnighted to her about $50, $60 worth of materials, including the book, which contains all the contracts, with an explanatory letter. Well, about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a call from Beth. Dr. Horowitz, we're inviting you to come to the hearings where they were going to discuss vaccinations, military contractors, and biological weapons. And I said, Beth, that's wonderful. I said, are they going to ask me to testify? Oh, no, Dr. Horowitz, we just are inviting you as a courtesy to come and be in the gallery. I said, Beth, thank you, but no thanks. I don't want to come there and get sick. So you want me to testify? It's another story. I'll pay my way. I'll be there tomorrow. Well, the word came back to me from a friend of Beth Clay's that the primary reason why they did not want to have me come and testify was because they said, quote, your material, Dr. Horowitz, is like throwing boulders on the top of heads of legislators, and we simply at this time want to throw a few pebbles to wake them up, end quote. As far as I'm concerned, that would be fine and glorious if it weren't for the fact that there are millions and millions of people who are dying right now. And that because of that attitude, those people's blood are on these legislators' hands. Let them be judged for this. So this is the emerging viruses, human genome relationship, the story. It's all about genetics. It's all about eugenics. That is racial hygiene. That is taking out dysgenic, undesirable populations. And that is what global genocide in the age of the New World Order is really about. Suddenly now you begin to wake up and realize why your family and friends are so sick and ailing. In the new book, we go into, it's called Death in the Air, subtitled Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare. And what brings the most meaning to what is going on in your family and friends today in your communities. What we now show you is going on in healthcare in America and virtually the world is what is militarily classified as, quote, non-lethal military warfare, end quote. What's that? Why, the think tanks of Rockefeller and Friends, and I'm talking about the Committee of 300 and the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Stanford Research Institute, and a number of other think tanks like Tavistock, came up with the fact that in order to control populations in a new world order, where you want to kind of like put away the really destructive weapons, because if you blow up like a nuclear weapon, it's costly to the infrastructure. The bankers own it anyway, so why destroy it? It's better to just basically kill people off silently and untraceably with biologicals and chemicals, which were perfected during the Holocaust. And so today what you're looking at is an economic substitute. That's their language. A, quote, economic substitute, end quote, for standard militarization using the, quote, Russian biological warfare method, end quote. And I suppose it's called the Russian biological warfare cocktail method because the Americans likely invented it, wherein you expose targeted populations to combinations of biological and chemical weapons simultaneously or within some period of time close to one another. So the chemicals wreak havoc with the immune system, leaving people more susceptible to opportunistic infections. Then the biologicals come in and then totally wreak additional havoc. Plus they've got the new designer microbes such as the mycoplasma agent that buries deep into the cells. It's very difficult to diagnose, even harder to treat. Standard antibiotics can't touch it, can't get rid of it for, more than a couple of weeks. And that ultimately that leaves this person sick chronically, ill, dependent then, virtually enslaved to a pharmaceutical complex. They become drug addicts. And that really is what the think tanks came up with as saying this is the way that modern warfare will be enacted in the 21st century. You have now enslaved a population, a culture, a nation to the pharmaceutical industrialists, and isn't this exactly what we're seeing in the headlines today regarding the pharmaceutical supplies for the country of Africa? So, to show you that what this is not a secret. It's a secret only because humanity has been dumbed down. That the people in charge at the highest levels of the Illuminati or the Freemasons, the highest levels, I'm not talking 33-degree Freemason. Most Freemasons are good human beings. 99.99% of them are doing good in the world. They think they're doing good and they're serving, unfortunately, not the same God that most of us, and the Judeo-Christian Muslim world pray to. Essentially to show you that these people at the highest levels, above 33-degree, know what's going on. I'm going to show you now a series of slides from Denver Airport. Today, as you go into the main terminal building from Denver Airport to get your baggage, you pass by a series of beautiful, colorful murals. To give you just a little bit more background before I show you this, there was another think tank report called the Report from Iron Mountain, which they said when it leaked out, when it was first published, that it was a hoax, it was a satire. Excuse me, when you read it, there's nothing funny about it. That's odd for a satire, isn't it? Well, when you read this, it lays out in the New World Order what, like I just mentioned, will be used to be an alternative to standard militarization and standard economics. And among these things, they called for slavery in a manner that people would not know they were enslaved. They called for, in order to create a new world order, and one world court, one world peacekeeping force, UN, you have to bring the peoples of the world together, which is far into what their traditional method of manipulation has been. For the last 3 millennia, at least, the people that we've begun to identify have manipulated the masses like sheep, sheeple we call them, to divide the sheeple to conquer the flock. You know them pretty well. These are the people who divide rich from poor, separate Jew from Gentile, Christian from Muslim, communist versus socialist versus capitalist, Democrat from Republican, black versus white, gay versus straight, pro-life versus pro-choice. Meanwhile, it's the same highest level military medical industrialists and international banksters who are pulling all the political strings on these puppet politicians and these fake front organizations. And the politicians they give us a chance to vote for in this thing that they call democracy that's actually corporate fascism masquerading in disguise on an international basis. And so that they called for in their think tank, in order to bring these sheeple that had been divided all these years in those ways, together they had to create a common enemy. See, unlike God that operates out of love, consistently always willing to forgive and just love and love and love and love. Satan works out of fear and manipulation, and the con artists, the puppet politicians, the think tanks, the propaganda mill, the spin doctors, they operate off of fear. So what they said is that we have to create a common fear for all the people all over the world. So let's think of what we should have. Well, ongoing worsening air pollution and environmental degradation was high on their list. Surprise, surprise. The environmental agenda is just that, an agenda. Then they said we're going to create an alien phenomenon. An alien phenomenon. Why? Because if there's one alien space vessel, threat to humanity, then we all have to combine our resources under one global governance. So, given that background, now you can begin to interpret what you see on your way to baggage claim in Denver Airport. Here you see a Nazi alien with a gas mask on. Obviously, the air is polluted so much he's got to wear a gas mask from the biological and chemical weapons that they've dispersed. Sticking, he is, a dove of peace with his saber against a horrific backdrop of genocide, mostly affecting black and Hispanic faces. Here he is. Get a good look at him, because this is who we are battling. Here is the faces of those stricken with child abuse, child molestation, infanticide that we are fighting. Now here you have a dedication to the extinct species. Against a horrific backdrop of flames and destruction, you see in the foreground, you see the American buffalo extinct, you see the sea turtle extinct, you see the whale extinct, and you have children crying over 3 open caskets in the foreground, which represent the extinct humans. Here you have, representing the black people of the world, the beautiful black woman dressed in native African attire. Here you have your native North Americans, dead. And if you're sitting there, white, middle class, probably Jew or Christian, and you think you're exempt, sorry, here you are. Lying on an American quilt, blonde-haired, likely blue-eyed, Christian Jewish woman, hugging to her chest a Star of David and the Bible with a cross. Separated by what is that? Oh, such wonderful symbol. The rose. The symbol of the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, dividing the Jews from the Christians. Isn't that exactly precisely what they began to do heavily around 300 with Constantine? So that today the Jews and the Christians live in a deceptive world, thinking each other are common enemies. Divide the sheep to conquer the flock. Now, why are these people particularly here? Why is it that you have these people here? Well, it just so happens that the black people, everybody knows them as having the most soul-filled. Well, what does that mean? It means also that they're the oldest people on this planet. It means they're also the most spiritually evolved people. And the Bible tells us it is not against flesh and blood with whom we do battle here. When speaking about the Rockefeller family, Nixon in an interview said, it's not about money for these people. These people have all the money they need. For them, it is about optimal power. And we know that optimal power, you study it, study people who get involved in it, corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so why you have this woman lying here representing the black people is because this is the manifestation of spiritual warfare being played out on this planet right now. Why do you have the Native American people here? Well, because the same reason. These people were so spiritually evolved that they thought it was ludicrous to even consider owning land. You don't own what the Great Spirit has given us as a free gift. You're a steward here. To be in awe at God's greatest mercies and presence. And why do you have the Jews and the Christians represented here? Of course, the Muslims are represented in the other slides, or the other slide, but this represents the covenanted people. The Jews got the first covenant The Christians got the blood covenant. They are, in essence, one. Pull down the facade, and they are one. But they are God's people. And that's why they are lying here in an open casket. I wish I had more time. This is the resolution. This is the great glorious ending to the New World Order. This is a celebration of the New World Order and the reconciliation after the Great War. Here you have a dance, and it's going on. It's all children now. One world religion is being depicted. There's a lotus, an Eastern type of guru character praying over the lighted lotus, representing the Eastern New World, one world religion. But in the background, there's people from all different countries dancing, and guess who's leading the dance? How appropriately, the Scottish Rite Freemason. Again, who trails in his shadow is the black little girl. Now, to show you that this is, again, nothing I'm making up, here again is another slide of the resolution where you see the Nazi alien dead now. You see the celebration in the background. You have the Deutsche, the German boy, Deutsche Bursch, pounding the symbol of fascism, the anvil, down communism, banging the saber of the dead Nazi alien in the resolution. Of course, in the foreground, you've got the British flag waving very well, and on the other side, there's the American flag being held mostly by the Chinese, interestingly enough. And that if you focus this slide, now you're going to see that I didn't make this up, that this is the dedication capstone to Denver International Airport. March 19, 1994, when you do the numerology on it, it's 9, it's completion. And that ultimately it says, for the New World Airport Commission, dedicated by the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Claude W. Gray, Grand Master, and over there, it's virtually the same, another Lodge of, Grand Lodge of Colorado, Benjamin J. H. Bell, Junior Grand Master. What's the difference between these two? One's black, one's white. One's the black Illuminati, one's the white Illuminati. So it's a racist organization to begin with, and they're certainly continuing in their saga. There's great news, though. Let me tell you just briefly the good news, and then I think I have about 5 more minutes, and then I've got to end. The book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse relays the best of the best news and the worst of the worst news in this era of bio-spiritual warfare. The best of the best, thank God, is a little bit better than the worst of the worst. The worst news in the last 6 chapters deals with this illness called mad cow disease in humans, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, based on the protein prions. That's what causes it. And that it's going to make AIDS, according to all the scientific community, seem like picnic in the park on Sunday. This, despite the fact that your Centers for Disease Control tell you today that there are very few, if any, cases of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in the United States, and they're lying royally. A recent Yale study, for instance, showed that 13% of Alzheimer's patients, of which there are 4.5 million in the United States today, have been misdiagnosed. They actually have Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, mad cow disease in humans. That's over 450,000 Americans right now. So the good news is that my colleague, Dr. Joseph Palaio, was given, by blessing, divine guidance, God's musical scale. You know, we think of the musical scale as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, since the sound of music. Thank you, Hollywood, for the great and grave deceptions that we have received. God's musical scale is 6 notes. He created the universe in 6 days. 7 Levi priests circled the great wall of Jericho in the book of Joshua for 6 days, each day playing out of their horns specific tones that made that wall come crashing down. God, through the spoken word, creates, destroys, and creates miracles. So creation, destruction, and miracles is the technology that we now understand. God has given us the divine, glorious understanding of His technology of how it works. Now, this knowledge has been buried. It has been buried by, initially, the ancient Levi priests, who when they translated the original Torah into the Greek Septuagint. They instilled the verse numbers in the Bible some 3,000 years ago. This is wherein the codes lie in this particular book. There are other Bible codes that are different from these. Some are totally bogus. Some are distractions. We expose those in the book Healing Codes, such as Michael Drosnin's work called the Bible Codes, which basically we show you that he is a national security propagandist. At any rate, the 6 tones that were revealed to my colleague and we write about are fantastic in that mathematically, harmonically, and by definition in Webster's dictionary, they all relate in all those ways to the 144,000 humble servants of God who are to assemble and are currently being assembled in these end times to sing God's praises is in such a way as to instantaneously and miraculously bring this planet back to God. That is the glorious blessing in this book, Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. We use that basic knowledge and we use some fundamentals in Scripture as to what does God tell you to do if you get sick. In the book Healing Celebrations, I give you the 5 steps that you need to do to prepare your temple of God to defend itself against the current and coming plague. Step 1, like the Bible says, is fasting and detoxification. We give you specific fasts. I highly recommend you do them at this time. Step 2 is deacidification, changing your body's chemistry, making it more alkaline. The Rockefellers and friends want you to live the lifestyle that causes your body chemistry to turn acidic. Caffeine, nicotine, sugar, stress, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, and red meats all cause your body to become acidified. And it is in the acidified state that the bacteria, viruses, fungus, molds, yeast, and cancer cells grow. They cannot grow well, if at all, if you simply change your body's chemistry by following virtually the Levitical diet and drinking a lot of good, pure water with a pH of about 8. Or substitute foods such as watermelon. Do watermelon fast. That's pH of 8. Foods such as millet flour, pH. Get yourself food acid-base charts and see what you're eating. Alkalinize your temple of God. Step 3 then. After you've done step 1, detox, which also involves getting your colon right, because the colon is the cornerstone, the basis for health, including what your gut flora, soil-based microorganisms that should be in your gut. So you can assimilate the nutrients out of the hopefully organic, whole, raw foods that you're eating. Okay? And then the colon, of course, helps to detox as well as the good, pure blood. So detoxing blood, liver, and kidney. That's critical, and that's done largely through fasting, as we share with you. Step 3, once you've done those 2 steps, is boosting immunity every way possible, the holistic approach. Not popping a magic pill to cure every ill. That's the pharmaceutical industrialist way. That's what you are all searching for. You're looking for that magic pill. The only reason you're searching for it is because you've been sold down the tubes. God's healthcare plan is holistic. It involves physical, mental, emotional, social, environmental, and above all, spiritual changes, choices that you have to make in order to survive today. Step 4, and 5, you do if you're sick and ailing. Everybody should do steps 1 through 3. If you're sick and ailing, you do oxygenation and bioelectric therapies. Oxygenation and bioelectric therapies. The other 5 critical things in Healing Celebrations book is the spiritual correlates and antecedents for miraculous healing. We demystify now, through modern science, scriptural prescriptions for miracles. The Bible is full of miracles. Now, with the knowledge that we have, we can demystify it. We can understand it, because God wants us to understand it now. He tells us in the Bible, in the end times, I will pour out my Spirit to you, and all the secrets, all the truths will be known. Now is that time. So, 5 correlates and antecedents for miraculous healings we go into. You can prepare yourselves to produce miracles because you are divine children of God, fully empowered to produce those and co-create with the Heavenly Father, who simply wants to take pride in your co-creations, and you be basically like you as parents want your children to come to you every once in a while and say, you know, Daddy, Mommy, I love you, you're great. His Father wants the same thing. So the last thing is, and then I'm out of here. Payment, I know. The last thing is, please give us your support. Look forward. We have order forms for the new book that's, God willing, coming out in May. And here's the good news in the new book. One of the things that we have that I think is the glorious celebration is based on the revelations and healing codes. These alphanumerics, the numbers of the ancient music, and the alphanumeric codes where we can begin to realize our divinity and our power in the spoken word and prayer. That in the new book, I'm going to be delivering what I had asked for. I had prayed to God to give me about 6 years ago. I prayed to God to give me the Achilles heel of the Illuminati. There's got to be an Achilles heel. And I prayed for it. And I believe in all my heart, and I believe you can test me and prove me right. I'm delivering to you in the new book the Achilles heel of the Illuminati. What is it? It's their code. And it's the fulfillment of Revelation 13:18 and 14:1, where in the book of Revelation, the prophecy is at the greatest, darkest time of all human history. It's always darkest before the light, and suddenly there will be light, and it begins with Revelation 13:18